Good evening, dear listener. Welcome back. Tonight, you and I return to another quiet corner of forgotten time, where old myths still glow faintly, like dying embers in a stove left burning in a communal kitchen. Whether you're stretching under soft sheets, drifting in half-sleep, or simply hiding from the noise of modern life, thank you for joining me. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe for more slow journeys like this one, where we wander without hurry and learn without effort. Now, take a breath. Let your body sink a little deeper. We're not stepping into just any room or moment. No, we're slipping through the creak of a wooden floor, through the seams of an old coat, through the folds of time. And where we land is not golden, not romantic, but real, gritty, layered. A land of contrasts wrapped in red silk and smoke. This is the Soviet Union, and you are there. The calendar on the wall reads 1976. It hangs slightly crooked, held in place by a bent nail. A photograph of Brezhnev stares at you above the months, his eyes flat, unreadable. You're standing in your apartment, or rather, your segment of it. One room out of 5 shared with strangers who became neighbors and neighbors who became family. The building is concrete, gray and flaking, but to you, it's just called home. You wake to the rattle of pipes and the shuffle of feet in the hallway. Someone already claimed the bathroom. You grab your towel and wait your turn, eyeing the samovar in the corner that still smells of last night's tea. On the windowsill behind frost-bitten glass, a jar of pickled tomatoes glows faintly red in the rising dawn. You made them with your aunt in the fall. They're for winter. Everything here is for winter. You dress simply. Wool tights, worn shoes, a skirt. On Sundays, you wear lipstick, hidden away during the week in an old biscuit tin behind your wardrobe. You don't wear it for anyone, just for yourself. Outside, the city is moving. The trolley screeches on rusted rails. Snow mixes with ash and falls in slush against the streets. A man on the corner sells newspapers with bold headlines in thick, blocky type. You glance at it, but you already know what it says. Everything is fine. Everything is strong. The party is working. The West is failing. That's the story you were told. The only one you're allowed to repeat. But you know better. You know the queues that snake outside the bread store, the ration books in your drawer, the hush that falls over a room when someone says too much. You remember the day your teacher didn't return to school. You don't ask why. No one does. Still, there is comfort here, not comfort as the West might define it. There are no plush couches or full refrigerators, but a rhythm, a sense of shared understanding. You know your neighbors. You borrow salt. You lend shoes. You eat together when there is food and make jokes when there isn't. A wedding means dancing. A funeral means singing. And there are moments, brief, beautiful, when the world feels full of possibility. Like the night the radio picked up a foreign station and you heard music, real music, soulful, electric, alive. You pressed your ear to the speaker and held your breath, afraid even the air might betray you. Or the day your cousin returned from a trip to Hungary with a smuggled tube of American toothpaste. And for a week your mouth tasted like mint and freedom. Most of the time you don't think of these things. You work, you walk, you queue, you endure. But sometimes, in the quiet, your mind drifts to the invisible cracks beneath it all. The whisper that maybe, just maybe, life elsewhere is different. Still, As the samovar hisses once more and the scent of black tea drifts through the air, you sit beside the radiator and close your eyes. The warmth hums through the floor. The stories may be rigid, the walls cold, the rules unforgiving. But in this moment, you are not alone. You are part of something bigger, older, heavier than you. And now, my dear listener, the hour grows late. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts settle like snow on Red Square. The Soviet Union was not all tragedy nor all triumph. It was a paradox built on silence and sacrifice, on community and control. And tonight, as the echoes of that vanished world lull you gently, may your sleep come as gently as a falling flake on a winter's coat. Now, you awaken before sunrise to the quiet hum of radiators and the faint smell of cabbage soup lingering from last night's pot. The surrounding apartment is silent, but not still. The walls are thin and you can hear a neighbor coughing behind the plaster. Another shifting on a creaky mattress. You rub your eyes and stretch beneath the scratchy blanket, the same one you've had since you were a child. It is rough, but warm, like most things in your life. You rise, wash your face with water from the enamel basin, and lace your boots. Cracked leather, soft from use. The hallways dim, and smells of boiled potatoes, burnt oil, and wet coats. A single flickering bulb lights your path as you make your way toward the trolley bus. Outside, the cold is sharp and dry, and the wind carries with it the low hum of factories stirring to life. As you travel, you pass by murals of heroic workers and slogans painted boldly in red. Work is honor. Forward to the victory of communism. You don't pay them much mind anymore. They've been there since you can remember, like clouds in the sky or stains on old wallpaper. The factory where you work looms like a grey colossus. Inside, machines clatter endlessly, and your hands follow motions they've long memorized. Precision doesn't matter much, output does. Numbers, tonnage. You're proud, in a quiet way, when your quota is filled, even if it means staying late, even if your muscles ache. After your shift, you stop at the store. A queue is already forming, even before the shelves are stocked. You scan the aisles, hoping for eggs or sausage, or maybe oranges, though you know better than to expect them. A tin of sprats and a loaf of black bread will have to do. The cashier doesn't smile. Neither do you. That's not part of the exchange. There is no small talk. There is only motion and ration. Still, the street outside feels oddly alive. Someone has set up a loudspeaker with music, an old crooner's voice spilling out, full of longing. A woman balances a baby on her hip while sipping tea from a jam jar.
A boy chases pigeons past the statue of Lenin. And you? Well, you pause for a moment and let it all soak in. Because this is your life, your version of stability, of peace. Later at home, you share a quiet meal with family or friends. Maybe you discuss the latest episode of 17 Moments of Spring, or listen to a new record from Melodia. You talk about little things, how the bread tasted today, or whether a cousin finally got her coat from the store after 3 months on the waiting list. Bigger conversations about politics, about the West, about dissatisfaction. Those stay, locked behind eyes and quiet nods. Privacy is precious. Thoughts are safer, left unsaid. On Sundays, you take a long walk. Parks are free, and the birch trees sway with a kind of patience you envy. Sometimes you visit the Palace of Culture to watch a performance or attend a lecture. Entertainment is planned, structured, and often earnest. But it offers you an escape, an illusion, a mirror of greatness. And in all this, you feel something contradictory. A strange pride, perhaps, in making it work. In surviving the long lines and short supplies, in laughing with friends on icy benches and finding warmth in a stove-lit room. The Soviet way of life is not easy, but it is yours. You were shaped by it. Hardened, yes, but not broken. Taught to endure, to adapt, to make do. And now, the lights dim. The city slows. You sit once more by the window, steam from your tea, fogging the glass as night blankets the rooftops. Somewhere, a distant accordion plays. The wind taps gently at the pane, and inside you, a calm settles. A quiet knowledge that while the world outside may shift, tomorrow will still begin with boiled eggs and queue lines, with quiet resistance and shared stories. So now, my dear listener, let your mind drift. Let the memory of snow falling in slow spirals drift across your thoughts, like ash from a coal stove. Sleep comes not with promises, but with peace. And in that stillness, know this: you are remembered. It was said that the Soviet Union was a grand mosaic. 15 republics pieced together, not by accident, but by unity, shared labor, and the timeless dream of equality among peoples. Posters showed smiling children in embroidered shirts, arms linked under banners declaring friendship of nations. School books spoke of internationalism as sacred truth. Lenin had preached it. The party promised it. And yet, as time went on, the corners of that mosaic began to crack. In the early mornings, mothers in Crimea would wake their children quietly, not with songs, but with whispered instructions. How to pack quickly, how to stay silent. These were the Tatars, deported in cattle cars under Stalin's orders, accused en masse of treason. In the shadows of the mountains, the trains came and left, bound east, leaving homes empty and orchards to rot. When years later they returned, the keys no longer fit the locks. What awaited them was not restitution, but surveillance. They reported to the district militia like clockwork, living reminders of a past no one was allowed to speak of. Across the steppes, a boy named Joker stood before the entrance of the Tambov Military Aviation School. His fingers trembled slightly as he signed the application form, not with the truth, but with what was acceptable. Ossetian, it read. He was not Ossetian. He was Chechen. But he had learned that honesty was a luxury. Ethnic labels, some lifted you, some buried you. The party claimed unity, but the system whispered rankings. In the universities of Moscow and Leningrad, gifted Jewish students puzzled over entrance exams they were never meant to pass. Behind closed doors, professors were instructed to limit Jewish enrollment, especially in mathematics, physics, and foreign affairs. One could be born brilliant, but not born right. The reasons were cloaked in slogans: anti-Zionism, protecting national interest, internal security. It was never called what it was, not allowed. Even absurdity found its way into ideology. David Dragunsky, a Jewish general loyal to the state, was appointed to lead the anti-Zionist committee. His speeches denounced his own people with icy precision, a face of loyalty masking layers of contradiction. He stood beneath portraits of Marx and Lenin proclaiming brotherhood, while behind him, party officers tallied ethnic quotas and issued silent rejections. By the late 1980s, the tensions could no longer be disguised. In Janauzen, what began as a fight in a disco turned into days of bloodshed between Kazakhs and Caucasians. The tanks rolled in, and the radio told the public all was fine. It wasn't. In Fergana, a quarrel became a pogrom. Uzbeks turned violently on Meskhetian Turks. Families dragged into streets, homes torched, lives extinguished. The newspapers reported disturbances. Survivors called it something else: truth. Still, each May Day, red flags fluttered and children recited poems about harmony. The myth endured because it had to. Without it, too many would have to confront the uncomfortable truth that the great experiment, for all its grandeur and promise, had its fractures, deep and sharp. And yet, there were also moments, fleeting, fragile, when children of different roots played together on cracked sidewalks, when co-workers shared bread at the factory table, when neighbors helped each other through cold winters, not because they were the same, but because survival demanded kindness. And so the story goes, a land that spoke of unity, but stitched its seams with silence. A people told to love one another while quietly watching who was promoted and who disappeared. Now, dear listener, the night grows deep and still. Let these truths rest softly beside you, not with heaviness, but with understanding. The past was not simple. It rarely is. But here beneath blankets and quiet thought, we let the complexities drift away. The stars above shine for all nations, without hierarchy or fear. So breathe gently and dream without borders. The dream of a key, just one key, glinting in the palm of a Soviet citizen, symbolized far more than shelter. It was proof of arrival. It meant a place, however small or crumbling, that was yours. At least in name. And in the long corridors of Soviet waiting lists, that dream sustained millions. The myth was that it was free, that the generous hand of the state bestowed housing to all without cost. That while Americans wasted away in mortgage chains, the Soviet man and woman were handed apartments by right. But myths are often stitched with silence. In truth, every nail and brick was already paid for by the hands of factory workers, the hours of collective farmers, the deductions quietly extracted from salaries, and the invisible taxes on labor and goods. The illusion of free housing came at a steep and unspoken cost. Few received apartments as a reward. Most had to queue. If you were not a police officer, soldier, or party official, you waited. Years passed. Birthdays came and went. Sometimes people died while still waiting for their turn. There were no catalogs to browse, no city maps to choose from. Your name was called, and you were sent where the state sent you. 9th floor, no elevator. One room, 5 people, concrete walls so thin you could hear the breath of the neighbors. And for the desperate, there emerged a subtle art of persuasion. Gifts to officials, whispered conversations in stairwells, cash slipped between documents. A shadow market bloomed beneath the planned economy, less a rebellion than a survival tactic. But even when you received an apartment, it wasn't truly yours. It belonged to the ministry, the factory, the university. You couldn't sell it, only swap it. And even then, only through chains of families stretching across cities. Minsk to Kazan, Leningrad to Dushanbe. Each link fragile, easily broken by a single change of heart. This was the infamous apartment exchange system, and it was both a marvel of patience and a tragedy of dependency. Before these grim concrete towers, there were communal apartments, communalkas, carved out of what had once been single-family homes or bourgeois mansions. Each room became a family's entire universe. One hallway, one shared toilet, one kitchen with 3 gas stoves and 15 spoons. Here, privacy was a myth more elusive than ownership. Life was loud, messy, and suffused with smells. Cabbage boiling, old boots drying, newspapers burning for heat in winter. Children learned to sleep through the sound of neighbors arguing behind thin doors. Women carried water from broken sinks. Men hung laundry above bathtubs. For a time, this was painted as virtuous. Lenin had declared that individual comfort was a bourgeois vice, and Stalin ensured that millions were re-educated in the virtues of shared suffering. These places were meant to create a new kind of citizen, collectivist, hardened, loyal. But many simply became tired, exhausted by the proximity, by the cold, by the walls that never stopped listening. During the Second World War, even the barest homes were a luxury. In the smoking ruins of cities, families dug bunkers beneath barns. People lived in cellars with no windows. Children were born in supply sheds. For years, there was no such thing as housing, just shelter. And so, when Khrushchev launched his campaign of mass construction in the 1950s and 60s, even the simplest concrete slab apartment felt like a castle. Yes, the plumbing barely worked. Yes, the ceilings flaked. Yes, the buildings were identical. But they were dry, and they were warm, and for once, they had doors that locked. So the myth endured. not out of ignorance, but out of contrast. Compared to the barracks and basements of war, the Khrushchevkas felt like a miracle. People didn't choose them because they were free. They accepted them because they had never been allowed to want anything else. And so, dear listener, as the night deepens and your thoughts slow to the gentle rhythm of your own breath, let the echoes of these stories settle quietly beside you. Not all myths are lies. Some are memories softened by time. Some are hopes dressed as facts. And some are simply the best version people were allowed to believe. So rest now beneath your own roof, whether it creaks or hums or breathes with age. You are home. The wind outside cannot reach you here. They said it was the most educated country on earth. They said the people of the Soviet Union were the most literate, the most capable, the most intellectually refined. And in a way, it was true. The grand campaign to eradicate illiteracy in the 1920s and 30s had lifted millions from a life without words into a world of books, posters, speeches, and slogans. Workers once blind to letters could now read the newspaper, or at least the headlines. It was a quiet revolution of paper and ink. But beyond the slogans, beyond the proud statistics and monuments to school teachers, lay a more complicated truth. Getting into a Soviet university was never just about grades. In theory, every young man and woman had the right to education. In practice, that right often depended on connections, party loyalty, or silent compromises. The admission exams, taken not on paper, but face to face before a commission, were the first obstacle. There were no cameras, no recordings, no written proof. A wrong name, a wrong accent, the hint of an undesired background, and the examiner's pen could simply write failure. No explanation needed. But for those with the right documents, a glowing referral from a local party official, a nod from a Komsomol leader, the path became smooth, almost preordained. And even when one succeeded, the reward was not immediate freedom, but distribution. The graduate would not choose where to work. The state would choose. An engineer trained in Leningrad might be sent to a windswept town on the edge of the Kazakh steppe. A teacher in Kiev could find herself in a distant Siberian village where the winters never ended. It wasn't exactly payment, but it wasn't exactly free either. Education in the USSR had a price, and it was paid in years. Inside the lecture halls, knowledge was shaped to fit ideology. No matter the field, biology or literature, physics or music, every student studied Marxist-Leninist philosophy. Every curriculum bent around the axis of party truth. Historians rewrote the past. Economists denied capitalism existed. Journalists were trained not to investigate, but to reinforce. Even the sciences, while more autonomous, were confined by the demands of the military-industrial complex. A brilliant mind might rise quickly if it built rockets, but if it questioned the official line, it might disappear just as fast. The humanities were the most tightly leashed. A museum curator had to know which exhibits to show and which to quietly lock away. A librarian was trained to guide curious hands away from the wrong books. A literature professor walked a narrow line between praising great Russian writers and ignoring those whose politics were inconvenient. In this world, creativity was permitted only if it wore the right uniform. Still, the students learned. In dormitories, dimly lit by flickering bulbs, they whispered poetry that had been banned. In cold cafeterias, they passed samizdat copies of forbidden novels under tables. In hidden corners of libraries, they lingered over untranslated works from the West. The hunger for knowledge had not been extinguished. It had simply gone underground. And so, dear listener, as your mind winds down like the last light in a distant faculty hallway, remember, not every school is a temple of truth, but every student who seeks light in darkness is already free. Education, even when twisted, plants seeds. And in quiet places across that vast country, minds bloomed where no one expected them to. You, too, have wandered the corridors tonight. You have seen the chalkboards and the cold benches. You have listened to the voices, some real, some imagined. Now, it's time to close the textbook. Time to return the pen to its place. The lecture is over. The night is warm. Sleep now, quietly and deeply, as snow drifts softly outside a forgotten Soviet library. Rest well. Dream freely. And may your questions always find their answers. Finally, the smell of fresh rye bread drifting through cold stairwells. The metallic taste of buckwheat and liver in a kindergarten bowl. The greasy comfort of a canteen borscht, always the same, no matter the city. For many Soviet citizens, food was not about flavor. It was about survival. The state promised abundance and health, and in return, it demanded loyalty, or at the very least, silence. But beneath the slogans of dietary glory, Soviet cuisine told a far more peculiar tale. The story begins not in Moscow or Kiev, but in 1930s America, where Anastas Mikoyan, commissar of the people's food industry, roamed meat-packing plants and fast food kitchens, fascinated by assembly line meals. He returned with the dream of modernizing Soviet food production, importing both hamburger machines and ice cream technology. For a time, these innovations lifted the table of the average Soviet worker. The cutlets were rich in meat. The dairy was fresh. Even the canned goods had pride in their labels. But as years passed, things began to fade. Meat was replaced with breadcrumbs. Ice cream lost its cream. Recipes shifted to fit supply, not taste. Soviet cuisine was never about indulgence. It was about uniformity. In every school cafeteria, hospital ward, army mess hall, or factory lunchroom, the same rules applied. Spices were restricted. Salt and pepper became luxuries. By the 50s and beyond, GOST, the proud state standards, began to change. No longer were they strict guardians of purity and quality. Instead, they permitted the slow introduction of chemical additives, colorants, and synthetic flavors. Sausages that once sizzled with pork and garlic now sweated preservatives and emulsifiers. The once praised 2-ruble sausage, iconic and nostalgic, was smoked using turpentine byproducts. It looked the part. It no longer tasted it. And as the years passed, these myths solidified. In Ukraine and elsewhere, post-Soviet spaces lacked deep public studies on daily Soviet life. No one taught the full story of food policy, industrial shortcuts, or ideological diets. And so the myths endured. They gave strength not only to the past, but to modern Russia, which wraps its imperial ambitions in the warmth of shared soup and bread. It was better then, they whisper. Let us return to the way it was. But beneath the memories, the flavors have long gone cold. So, dear listener, as the gentle hum of a distant refrigerator fades into the night, and your thoughts float like steam from an old enamel teacup, Let go of that old kitchen, that silent queue outside the grocery store, that echo of aluminum trays sliding down factory lines. Let the nostalgia melt like the last sliver of butter on black bread. You have wandered deep tonight, through menus and myths, spoons and silence. And now it is time to rest. Close your eyes. The stove is off. The cupboards are quiet. Sleep well, little dreamer. May your dreams tonight be flavored only with truth and a touch of sweetness.